Thanks, Ted. It's been fun to prepare this for you today. And I hope I'm going to try and get this all set up, share my screen here, see if I can do this in a way that will let me still see your faces and still see the chat. But Ted, I'd love your help. If for some reason I can't see the chat, I would love for you to just shout out questions that might come.
Will do.
And really welcome it as we go along. So please interrupt me. Please say, wait, stop. I want you to go a little deeper there, or you went too fast. Can you go back to this thing? So I'm really happy to get to visit with you. I'm actually one of you. I am a graduate student myself. I am in the doctoral program for the McKay School's Educational Leadership doctorate, and see one of my cohort mates here with me today, Janie Mitchell. So I feel your pain, actually, is what I want to say. I do feel your pain. I feel your pain about all of it. Well, a lot of it anyway, and some of the uncertainty that goes with it. And I asked Ted if you guys will indulge me, I want to share a little bit of my story to introduce myself, because I think it will go along with some of the things that we will talk about today. So again, I've arranged this so we can stop and have questions along the way, or I can share what I've got and then we can have questions at the end, either way. So a little bit about me. I graduated from BYU in 1992. This is me on graduation day. I was 8 months pregnant. And you can see that actually campus hasn't changed too much in 30 years. Still the same trees and mountain behind me there. I had an undergraduate degree in communications, and at the time my plan was to go to law school. So after graduating, I did get a job at a law firm. Actually, I worked full-time initially at this law firm as a file clerk. And unlike probably many of you who have gone on to graduate school, I hadn't done a lot of investigating prior to about law school, about careers in law. So my experience at the law firm was my first foray, if you will, into that field. And it was a wonderful firm. It's a big firm. The Christmas parties and bonuses were fantastic. But I found the environment was a little stiff for me. And that put me into sort of a tailspin that I thought, well, now I don't know that I want to do law. Now what? For many years, I didn't know really what my calling would be. And we were living in Utah at the time, and I'll show you some pictures of my family. We moved to Texas so my husband could go to the University of Texas at Austin. He completed a PhD in curriculum and instruction. So I've had the spouse experience of someone going to grad school. And then we moved to Hawaii, where both my husband and I worked at BYU Hawaii. And this is a picture of our commute to work there in the circle. And I got into higher education as an academic advisor, still with only my undergraduate degree. My husband was working as a professor. And then I did an online master's degree while I was in Hawaii from Kansas State University. And that proved to be such a blessing to me in the knowledge that I gained from that and how applicable it was in the work that I was doing. And I moved into an administrative role and over career services and alumni, and then came to BYU, where I enrolled as a doctoral student. I'm in my current role now, which I should say I'm the managing director of careers and experiential learning and internships here at BYU. And so that's a little bit about kind of my journey and how unplanned it was. I didn't know, for example, 30 years ago that there were such people as career services or advisors, or really the whole world of student affairs was unknown to me. So if you had asked me in 1992, outside of law school, what did I want to do with my life, I really would have shrugged my shoulders, because I didn't know. And I just didn't know what I didn't know. Just along the way, I had triplets, and they came pretty early. So one of our little guys passed away after a day. And this is me holding our other two guys. They were 2 pounds when they were born, and spent some time in the NICU. And then we had 3 other kids who are now grown up, and many are in college right now. And my husband's working at BYU as a professor, and then I'm in my role. And so that's a little bit of my journey. So life continued on in parallel with the career and education aspirations that I had. So how I organized today, I hope this will be meaningful for you. So I went a little bit higher level. Well, I hope it's a good mix of some things that are maybe more aspirational, inspirational, with a mix of some things practical. Because I thought if I came on and gave you a how-to on resumes and CVs, that I would lose you after maybe 10 minutes. So I'm not doing that today. I do know how to do that. And if you want more of that, then ask, please ask the questions. But I thought how I wanted to organize today is to help you understand that you have a fantastic skill set that you've gained as graduate students in your programs. You have developed critical thinking skills. You've developed writing skills. You've developed reading skills and how to read a lot of material and synthesize it. And you have had to, I am quite confident you've had many unplanned things happen in your grad school journey. And so I wanted to frame today with the skills that you've developed as a grad student and how you can now apply that to moving beyond your grad school experience and into your careers. So I wanted to start with I want to start with what is your why? And this is what the first bullet point is write your thesis statement. So if you have a window open, or if you're a pencil and paper kind of a person, I would encourage you to just write down some thoughts that come to your mind about what really motivates you, why you did the program that you did, so I'll present some questions to you, but I want you to be thinking about, you've now gathered a lot of knowledge and a lot of skills in your program. That's not your why though. That's something that you've done to hopefully empower your why. And so some ways to think about your why. This is a great statement by Matt Sanders. Without the compelling why, the what, and I would say grad school there, and the how don't really matter. And as we go on, I hope you'll see how important the why is to underlies everything that we do. So one way to get at your why is to use a little bit of design thinking. And this is from Bill Burnett's Designing Your Life. You can get the book. Some of you might be familiar with this. But they talk about getting at your why through kind of some visualization. Visualize your optimized life. Like, what is your current plan? And think about what that looks like 1 year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now. And what are you doing? And who are you working with? What environment are you in? And so you can start with what your current plan is. And if you don't, you might have 2 or 3 options. That's okay. Just choose one of them as to be your plan. And then you can move into your alternate life. So if number 1 didn't work out, you don't get admitted, maybe you're going on to a PhD program, or one track is, I might consider going on to a PhD program, but I might consider going on to industry now. So maybe number 1 is going on further. Maybe number 2 is like, okay, I'm going to go on into industry, and then visualize out what would that look like, and where would you go, and 1 year out, 3 years out, 5 years out. And number 3 is really fun. Actually, I get a lot of insights when I do this with students, is what's your fascinated life? So if money or your image were no object, what would you really do? What would you pursue? And I think just writing that out can be really insightful to be like, oh, I want elements of that in my number one, possibly. Or maybe it'll be like, wow, actually, I want that to be my number one. So thinking about what you want to do is one way at getting at your why. And I'm sorry, I won't spend a lot of time here like we would normally in an exercise. I'd normally like take a 10-minute break here to let you write this out, but I'm just giving you the framework, and hopefully these are tools that you can use if this works for you. Another question you can think about to get at your why is, how will you apply your strengths? And hopefully you know what your strengths are. And if you don't know what they are, there are ways to find them out. A really simple, no cost way is to talk to your friends and family and ask them what they see as your strengths. It's an insightful exercise to hear what other people say, or especially those who are close to us. And I have seen that you'll start to see themes that will come back to you. And another way, of course, to do this is doing an assessment. You can do something like the Gallup Clifton Strengths Assessment, which shameless plug here, we do offer at BYU. And so it's easy. You don't have to see anybody. You can go to this website and sign up, take the assessment, and the results are available to you immediately. So this is something that my office offers, and a number of us, well, most of us actually, are certified strengths coaches as well. And we can help talk through your results if you'd like, but the results are pretty good. Do we have the link for the assessment online? You can get to it through the link here on the screen. And maybe I'll try and put that in the chat for you. If you want to just take it directly, okay. Yeah, if you want to take it directly, it'll cost you $20. If you take it through our site, I think it's just $12. So thank you. But thinking about your strengths, the Gallup has found in the research that they've done that when we are working in our strengths, we're happier, we're more satisfied, we're more productive. And so it's worth some considering about what are the things that I'm good at and what kinds of roles are going to let me really work in those strengths. I think sometimes we think about our weaknesses and like, oh, that's an area of weakness that I need to work on. And Gallup has found actually we're better spending time developing out our strengths than spending time trying to make weaknesses into strengths. We'll learn how to utilize our strengths towards our weaknesses that way. So Gallup's all about strengths first and develop those well, and then aim them if we want to look at aiming them a different way. So that's another way to get to your why, is like, okay, what are my strengths? How can I apply them? What kind of environments will let me do that? And then who do you want to become? And I love Clayton Christensen. I just feel like the world got a little bit dimmer when he passed away last year. Some of you may be familiar with his book, How Will You Measure Your Life? Highly recommend. If you haven't read it, please read it. But he has just such a humble and great way to ask some really thought-provoking questions. One question to consider is, how can I be sure I will be happy, I will be successful and happy in my career? And so I think for each one of us here, what does successful mean and happiness mean? What does that look like? It might be different for each of us. So spend some time on that question. How can I be sure that my relationships with my spouse, children, family, and friends become an enduring source of happiness? And some of you might be familiar with Clayton Christensen's research on disruptive innovation and how, companies, nobody plans to fail. Companies don't plan to fail, and yet they end up implementing strategies that ends up tripping them up. It's short-term wins over a long-term instead of long-term vision. And he uses an example, for example, Blockbuster in the 90s. I don't know if you guys would remember Blockbuster, but yes, okay, I see a few nods. That was like a major event for my young family in the 90s to go to Blockbuster and rent a video. I mean, I even remember the days of VHS or beta, and then it went to VHS or DVD. And anyway, Blockbuster was sitting on top of the home entertainment market in the late 90s when a little company called Netflix came along. And Netflix's whole model was, we'll mail the DVDs home. We don't have storefront. You lost the ability to get something immediately, but Blockbuster looked at them and thought, you know, the margins on that are so small. I think we're good where we are, where we're sitting in the market right now. And because of the current success they were enjoying, they didn't adapt. And by 2010, Netflix had garnered 24 million customers and Blockbuster had gone bankrupt. And it's just an example of how we as human beings are prone to choose the immediate successes in exchange for what we really want to have. I can put myself in here and say, I want to be a healthy and active adult as I grow older. And yet I'm finding that homework and grading and my job, I'm allowing to creep into time that I would spend exercising. So but it feels good to get those things done. But in the long run, I've got to make the little investment every day of exercising so I can get to my long-term goal. We do that in our careers too. And then his last question here is a good one. How can I be sure I live a life of integrity and stay out of jail? So with all of these, he's got a nice little metric of how to develop this purpose out with these questions. So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but think about what you want to become, who you are, and how you want to be. And I still think of a Relief Society president that I served with when I was a young mom, who was just the most peaceful person. I loved being around her. And I think about being more like her even still. And then making a commitment. Clayton Christensen says, having a conversion-like commitment to not compromise the likeness you want to become. Because as you all know, having survived graduate school or still surviving, you get wave after wave of circumstances sent at you to, whether it's a project or a paper or something. And you're like, oh, I've got to do that thing and want to get that thing done. And so having a commitment to who you want to be and how you allocate your time so that you can ride these waves when they come, because they do. And then identifying a metric. How will you measure your progress? And for Clayton Christensen, there's a great TED Talk he's got out there on how will you measure your life. I recommend if you've got 20 minutes. For him, it was relationships with others. How has he helped others in his life? That ended up being core to his life's purpose. So these are ways that we can get at that. And I think we have, so I wanted to just touch bases here. I would feel remiss if I didn't go to my career training, is that our why really comes through through our personal brand. It comes through in the way we interact with others, whether that's face-to-face interactions, whether that's online interactions, and the way we write. I think about emails, and maybe you've experienced this, of someone who's either written like a really long email of, points to make, or they write it in all caps or something. And, there are times when that communication may be a better conversation than an online communication. And I love this last thought of, how do others experience you? And this thought from Maya Angelou, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I think in all the learning that we are getting as graduate students, we need to never forget how we interact with others. And again, to me, it gets down to that why. Quick example of a friend and colleague. She used to work here at BYU. She's gone on now to a university in Texas, but this is Linda. She is a lifelong learner. She's always reading a book. This happens to be her latest one. She posted this on LinkedIn, so I'm sure it's a great book. I have not read it. But she tells a story about how in 8th grade, she started sending out a survey to her friends and family and asking them to describe her in 5 words and be completely honest. And she was surprised at the results that she got back. Initially were shy, reserved, quiet, because she didn't feel that way at all. And so she started being really intentional about being more outgoing in terms of interacting with others, asking them questions. And she's been doing this survey every other year ever since 8th grade. And she compiles her data like a good researcher would, and looks for themes over time. She looks to see if what others are saying align with the values that she's articulated, and looks to see if there are parts of her that she feels are really important and obvious, but they're not coming through what others say, and looks for ways to improve. And here's an example of what she has done. She's put together both the word cloud, and then you can see her 2018 results compared to her 2020 results. And she said that as she has been this intentional about how others are experiencing her over time, she's starting to see more congruency between what people are saying and what she espouses, and more congruent over time. So it's a really fun way that she, and I really admire her to get the feedback and to track it and to act on it. But it says a lot about her as a lifelong learner, honestly. But I think this whole thing about sketching out your life thesis statement, your purpose, really has foundations for us doctrinally, that things are created spiritually before they're created temporally. And so, again, we've been engaged in our studies and our work and progressing through our degree. But getting to our why, to me, is really foundational to all of that. It will help direct everything that we've learned. It will empower us to apply the things that we've learned in the ways that we want to go. So that's thought number 1. It was a little bit longer than I meant to, but the second one is gather data. Okay, this one's more practical and probably more what you were expecting that I would talk about today. But I know I got one question, I have it written down here, about from one person who asked, should I start a business and what should I be thinking about? Should I continue on in academia or should I go out into industry? And I don't have a crystal ball to answer that, but what I can say is to get information. And I love saying that our bishop says it. He says, information precedes revelation. And so as you are considering the different paths that you may want to consider, get information. So one thing I can tell you, this is hot off the press. This list doesn't actually change much except the order of things, of what the skills employers are looking for. Number 1 in the middle there is ability to work in a team. And I put in parentheses, I think that's code for fit. And again, why I spent the first part of this talking about what is your why is so many employers now are really wanting to get at who they are hiring. They feel like there's a lot of people that they can train to do the work, but they want to know if you're going to fit into their company culture, and they want to know if you're going to fit with the rest of the team. And so honestly, in a way, looking for a job is a bit of a tryout on both parts. You trying them out as well to see, gosh, is this a good fit for me? Does their company culture align with my values? And then you knowing yourself well enough that you can articulate your why so that they can feel that. I'm telling you that the candidates who do this well have many opportunities. So the job outlook for 2021, good news. We had a little bit of a panic last year, felt like we were going over the edge of a cliff. And it does depend and vary by industry. But overall, things are looking up and better. And there were some graphs I was thinking to show you, and I was like, oh, I don't think you guys want to look at graphs, but a lot of the graphs are good in that employers are hiring. We're actually to not quite to 2019 levels, but definitely on our way there. And so the question really though is for you to whatever industry you're wanting to go into, there's a lot of information out there. You can really just Google, but I'm also happy to share some resources with you so you can kind of see what the trends are in your industry. But get information about what you're wanting to go into, whether it's by industry, by company, or for a particular role that you're considering. I know when we were looking for my husband, what master's degree for him to consider, or what doctorate degree, we did some interviewing and some searching about, well, what do history professors make? And the course of that soured us a little bit when we learned, when we talked to his professor of history up at the University of Utah and realized, gosh, he's doing fairly well monetarily staying in the public school system. So it's just get data to empower your decisions. Here are some sources that you can look for jobs on campus. We've got an online job board. BYU Connect, some of you may not be aware, but this is an alumni networking tool. You can Google it to get connected. I'm sorry, I don't have the link ready for you here, but I think it's just as easy to put BYU Connect in Google and you'll find it. But we have thousands of alum who are geographically diverse and in diverse roles and industries that you can connect with. Great tool. And if you're an information gatherer, then there's a lot of other places that you can go to look for jobs and things. But I wish I could teach a whole hour on how to apply for a job, because you don't go to LinkedIn and apply on that link. You don't do that. And the best way really is to try and make a connection in the company of interest that you have and have a conversation with a person first. Get a feeling of the company before you apply so you can incorporate that feedback into your application. You will learn so much. And I've told my kids this, and I find that they don't listen to me. So I'm asking if you will please follow my good advice, because it works. And I've seen the students who take the time to have conversations before applying exponentially higher in terms of getting interviews and getting hired. And in fact, I can put some data behind this. The Marriott School has done a study of their MBAs, and they've gathered data on the activities that most likely lead to getting a job. And it's things like time spent on resume, time spent searching or applying online. And the two things, there are two statistically significant factors that connect to getting hired. One of them is a no-brainer, really. It's the number of interviews you have. So the more interviews you have, the more likely you are to get hired. But the second factor I think is really interesting, and that's doing informational interviewing, which is basically having conversations. It's not having a conversation to say, hey, I need a job. It's having a conversation to say, hey, I saw this posting at your company. I'm interested in it. I wondered if you had 15 minutes of your time that I could just ask you a few questions about your company, or about you and your story and how you got in your role, or any recommendations you would have for me. Super low threat conversations. It is, this is essentially networking, but we don't like that word. So we're just going to call it conversations. This is another great book. And Jared, thank you. So conversations with whom? So conversations would be with like alum, great question, alum who work at the organization that you might be applying to. That's it. That would be a low entry way. Hey, I see you're a BYU alum, and you can find this on LinkedIn. This book actually teaches you how to do it. You can find them through the BYU Connect networking tool. But find somebody at the company, even if it's through your own network, and have a conversation with them at the organization that you're hoping to join. And they'll guide you. They'll guide you through the interview process often too. Does that help in terms of finding? Okay, thank you. Thanks, Katie. So the 2-hour job search, I have to say that in my years in career services, this is the best, most systematic way to do a job search. I love this book. It breaks it down into to job search into very bite-sized, doable, non-scary things that you can do. And it's done in such a systematic way. It will surface companies or organizations that you have never heard of before. And the way it has you rate and prioritize and sort them, you'll find that some of these companies that you have never heard of before will rise up to your top 5 or 10. And I've done the process myself that they've taught, and it was so surprising to me to see it really does work. And it teaches you how to identify people to reach out to. And one point I don't have on here is that everyone's in different circumstances. You might reach out to, say, a BYU alum in an organization and they don't respond. Don't take it personal. They're busy and you just move on. You just, okay, I'll move on to somebody else. And you'll find different levels in the way people respond. Some will be really enthusiastic and want to spend time with you and want follow-up, and others will do the bare minimum, right? And that's more a reflection of them and what's on their plate. So don't get discouraged as you reach out and find that you're not getting a lot back. Just keep trying, keep reaching out. So informational interviewing, I really can't recommend it enough. It's just conversations. And I just put some points here to do it well. Do a little bit of homework before you contact someone, either about the organization that you're investigating. If you're thinking to go on in academia, this still works. You can still contact faculty or others in your field that you're interested in going into. It's always better to meet face to face. This obviously was made before COVID, but you can do a Zoom meeting just as well. Always offer to buy the lunch if you are in person. And you can ask, is there anybody else that, given our conversation today, is there anybody else you recommend that I could talk to or should talk to? And they may say no, and that's fine. But you've asked, and that's all. You've just asked, and it's not a big deal if they say no. And then always write a thank you note. Again, this goes back to that brand thing, right? And hopefully at our core, wanting to be the kind of person that always turns around and says thank you. We're the one leper, right? We want to be the one leper who turns around and says thank you. Okay, plan for the unplanned. And we've got just about 5 minutes left. So I want to share some things and then open it up for your questions. Planned happenstance is one of my favorite career theories, probably because I feel like I've lived it. So it's creating opportunities, and it's an actual theory, but creating opportunities for yourself out of aspirations that you would like to pursue in your career. Create chance events that turn into actual opportunities. And I did get one other question ahead of time that was from a student who is graduating, I think, with an MSW, and is interested in doing career counseling in higher ed, but potentially also being a faculty member, maybe having other roles, possibly other administrative roles, and or possibly doing therapy. So that's a lot of things. And how to prepare for that. I think what advice would I have? My advice is to just stay open and realize, and to pace yourself. You don't need to plan to do everything all at once. Find your next step and do that step really well, and be the kind of person that people like to be around, and other opportunities will open up to you. I feel like that's how my life has evolved, even sometimes when maybe I haven't been the nicest person to be around, but trying. I've never heard of before. I didn't know what a career director was, or working in student affairs and higher ed. It just wasn't on my radar. I didn't know anyone in my life who'd done it before. And it was really just through some experiences getting in as I did in a part-time role, and it evolved. And I learned as I watched other people do what they did. I was like, oh, that looks interesting. and I'd never heard of it before. So take time to look. Take time to look. And sometimes we may end up in a situation where we're wondering, like, why am I here? This is really not what I want to be doing. This isn't my passion. Why am I here? I would suggest that maybe there's a reason why you're there, and to ask God, why am I here? And what would you have me learn here right now in this situation that I'm in? Whether I did get to move on into what I wanted or I didn't get to move on into what I wanted. That's what planned happenstance is about. Like whatever the outcome is, it's about what can you learn along the way, and making that intentional, even if it wasn't where you intended to be. There's a great scripture in First Nephi on some characteristics of looking. And I'll just leave this to you to reference. I'll just go on here to this next. Maybe I will go on. Oh, looks like I froze. My slide has frozen. But you can see some words in there like having desires and believing and pondering. All of these things take time, right? Like it takes time. We can't be busy from dawn until dusk and have the ability to look. And I love this question in this middle sentence. The Spirit said unto me, what desirest thou? Well, hopefully if we've thought out our why, we have an answer to that question. In the case of Nephi, he wanted to know what his father had seen. Hopefully we'd never be caught flat-footed if the Spirit were to show up and say, what desirest thou? That we've kind of thought this out, best of my knowledge, this is what I'm wondering right now. And then I just wanted to leave a thought with you about lifelong learning. And if you'll permit me, I'm going to do a quick little bit of reading. A colleague of mine at BYU Hawaii, Dr. Ben Jordan, is a marine biologist. There you go, it's on the slide. And he shared this thought. So I don't know if some of you might know about Carrara marble, but it's some of the best marble in the world. And it was made in a specific part of the world and over obviously millions of years. But what makes it special is that it is created by, there was a certain organism that lived in the ocean at the time that had these shells. And as they died, those organisms died, they created layers on the ocean floor. Those layers then got compressed down where they get superheated. This is my very elementary school version of how marble forms. So any of you geologists, please forgive me. I know I'm not doing this justice, but anyway, superheated, and then eventually they get brought back up to the surface. So this Carrara marble is located in Italy, and it happens to be the source of some really famous sculptures like the Pietà by Michelangelo, and then also the Statue of David, and both made around 1500. And I'm sorry, I just lost the thought when I went to tell you. But I love this thought. He said, this process started millions of years ago to create this fine marble. And do you think it's chance that the Lord put in place these processes to surface this marble at a particular time and place so that Michelangelo could be born and apply his talents to that marble and create these gifts to the world? And if God, in ways that are inconceivable to me, can line up those kinds of events so that an individual can do his life's work, I have to think that he's done the same for us. And Neil A. Maxwell said something similar. That same God that placed that star in precise orbit millennia before it appeared over Bethlehem in celebration of the birth of the babe has given at least equal attention to the placement of each of us in a precise human orbit, so that we may, if we will, illuminate the landscape of our individual lives so that our light may not only lead others, but warm them as well. And so my closing thought here with lifelong learning is to let God prevail as we go forward, trying to find the next step, and trust that He has set into motion people and events and things. He has lined up the resources for you to do the work that you've been trained to do, and hopefully to do it in a way that will warm and lead others as well. And that is what I've got for you today. So questions?